So you don't want me to plug in?
All right, here we go, live. Finally, welcome to tonight's webinar on student-athlete recruiting. Yes, we made it on the air. We're starting a little late, so I apologize. But for all of you guys who stayed on, welcome. Hit the blue or whatever color arrow button there may be on your screen. It's usually like a play button. Could be white. And you should see me and Jeff. So if you stuck with us here, had a little glitch, welcome and thanks for sticking. We're attempting to record this also. Let us know you can see and hear us. We still have a good crowd, Jeff, so that's a testament to your magic. Jeff, can you hear me fine?
I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All right. So, let's see who is, all right, got Ruth. Ruth, I assume that means you can hear us. And before we had Irene, Robert, Sherilyn, Gina says A-OK. That's good. Let us know where you're dialing in from, even though you're technically not dialing at all. And we'll get started right now. Okay, so, Jeff, you ready? You took a breath?
I'm ready. Let's move.
Okay, good. So, all right. So this, so who should be listening to this webinar? Who belongs here? Who's in the right place? You're in the right place. You have a student athlete in your family who wants to play at the next level in college. If you are confused, if you don't know which showcases to go to, which coaches to talk to, how to talk to coaches, which camps to go to, how to reach out in general to coaches, you don't know where to start. That's what this webinar is all about. What you're going to learn today is me grilling Jeff without any preparation. So you're on the hot seat, my friend. We're going to talk about your experiences in terms of what coaches really want to see in a recruited athlete. I definitely want to spend time talking about money and scholarships because I get those questions all the time. I can only imagine how many times you get those questions. And I think we should be letting people know where we think they should start, just sort of how to clear the clutter and how to get going with this. So does that sound okay to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Does that sound okay to everyone on the webinar? Are you in the right place? If you are, say yes in chat, just to let me know. And I'll keep saying hi to Jack. Carrie says, can see and hear. Good. Michael Carner, hello. All right, good. So, Jeff, just to give us a little background, you've got both personal experience in the college recruiting process because you were a recruited athlete, and then you also went through it with a lot of your clients and your own family. So give us the executive Jeff summary.
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of parents and student athletes, and I have had some personal experiences that I can bring to bear, both personally, although the world has changed in many respects to a large degree, not that different. I was a recruited athlete. I did play football at Yale for 4 years and basketball for 1 year. I was recruited to play football. And I am testimony to the fact that being a recruited athlete can make all the difference in getting into an elite academic institution that I wouldn't have gotten into otherwise. I had not applied myself in high school as I probably ought to have, and I was fortunate to have the opportunity I did. I've worked with kids at all different levels. My son was a very highly recruited D1 athlete, literally could have gone to perhaps any school in the country to play baseball, almost any school if not, and ended up accepting a very significant baseball scholarship to the University of North Carolina. It didn't end up going because he was drafted out of high school by Major League Baseball, so he went that route, and now he's actually a student at the University of Pennsylvania. He unfortunately had several surgeries. He had to retire a couple of years ago. My older daughter was a softball player in high school, had an opportunity to play Division III. We explored that with a number of coaches. She ended up not playing at the college level at the varsity level, but could have at a Division III school. My younger daughter was a volleyball player in high school, and same scenario. Not a Division I talent in terms of her size, but could have played D3. But she had other priorities. She wanted to go to a major state university, and is doing so now. So I've had a variety of different experiences personally, and I have worked with kids and parents at all different levels of athletic and academic achievement, if you will.
All right. Very, very interesting, both you personally and your family, and your practice, which is great. So, so Jeff and I have teamed up. We're going to be presenting this webinar. At the end, we're going to be talking about our student athlete advisory, college advisory program that Jeff runs for us. He wears a couple different hats here at Lockwood College Prep. If you have questions, well, actually two things. The first is I put up a poll just to kind of help us figure out what your hot buttons are in terms of your burning question about recruiting. So I'm going to leave that up for another couple minutes, and then I'll announce the results. Is it identifying colleges where your child can play? Is it scholarships? Is it getting coaches' attention? Or is it D, all of the above? Don't know where to start. If you have questions for us, for Jeff, or me, but probably more for Jeff on this webinar, you can put them in chat. There's a little doohickey on the right side of your chat box, like a 3-dot thing. You click on that, and that'll allow you to flag that as a question, and I will be bombarding Jeff with your questions once I finish bombarding him with my questions. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So, we didn't really prepare much at all for this. So I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be off the cuff. It may not be what you guys have heard from your travel coaches, from recruiting websites, from sports academies. This is just Jeff's experience, and to some extent mine. And it's up to you to judge for yourself what you want to do with it. So, all right. So, how does a parent or a child evaluate their level of talent? And the reason I'm asking that should be pretty clear. But one of the reasons I'm asking that is because I meet with a lot of kids. I was a college athlete myself too, although more of a bench warmer at the D3 level. But I think a lot of kids, they start out with these aspirations of maybe trying to play a sport at a school like your son played at, like UNC or something, because they watch all the college basketball games and stuff. And they all think they're going to go Division I, and then sooner or later their views change. So how do you shortcut that? What's your best advice for figuring out what level of sport a kid can play, if they can even play in college?
Well, my feeling is that most high school varsity athletes will have an opportunity to play in college if they really want to play in college. And that means oftentimes broadening your horizon, so to speak, and being open-minded about where those opportunities might reside. It's always a reality check. Sometimes, all too often, parents will have unreasonable or illogical expectations. Know that less than 2% of high school athletes are getting scholarships to play a sport in college. So, and a much smaller percentage than that are getting Division I scholarships. So it's not like it's all out there. Now, having said that, that's specifically speaking athletic scholarship dollars. There are a lot of other benefits to being a recruited athlete or an athlete who injects themselves into the recruiting arena and turns themselves into a recruited athlete. Because coaches are interested in athletes, student athletes that express a real interest in their program and obviously have the ability to contribute to the program. You need to have an objective view. Sometimes, not as often as we would like, but sometimes the AAU coach can be very helpful in that regard. Sometimes the high school coach can be very helpful in that regard. But you need to put together your athletic resume and then present that to the school's coaches that you think are reasonable goals for you, if you will, attainable programs that where you think you are competitive, and we can help you. I can help you identify and ascertain how competitive you really would be at the various levels of intercollegiate competition. Some of that is going to be just based upon, depending upon the sport, size and speed and talent. And obviously there are a whole host of qualitative factors and skill and technique capabilities that come into the equation as well. In some sports, it's less qualitative in the sense that if you're talking about track and field or swimming, you've got a watch and times and measurements and distances, and it's very easy to take a look at what your scores or what your times or your achievements are, and then look at the scoring for a particular school and a particular conference and see what's competitive and what's not.
Okay, so couple people have said that the sound is choppy. I just want to let them know to close out all other browsers and other action here. So I'm just going to post that in chat here if you're having trouble hearing.
I'm going to plug in, Andy. I'm going to plug in and see.
Well, we may not be able to hear you if you do that. Don't
right.
Plug in. I don't want to risk it.
Okay. Why? Have we ever had an issue?
What? Yeah, just 1 out of 3 times with you. Close out all other programs. Sometimes it's not. It's sometimes it's just what someone else in the house is watching on like Netflix or something that sucks up a lot of bandwidth. So I apologize. The results of our poll, I asked, what's the burning question about recruiting, for people to answer that. And the biggest one, 52% said all the above, don't know where to start. 19% said getting coaches' attention. 29% said scholarships and paying for college. That was number 2. And then identifying colleges where a child can play was actually last, but I'm sure that's mixed into all of the above. Okay.
Well,
so
they all follow. I mean, all of those other considerations and priorities follow from where, in fact, you will be competitive. Those are the coaches where, an interest in your son or daughter is going to be represented and reflected, and there'll be response to your communication. The coaches are all going to want to see some sort of athletic resume, profile, if you will, in addition to academic information and player information, personal information. You have to put together some sort of combination of skills footage and game footage, depending upon the sport.
Okay. All right, great. So let's talk about what coaches are really looking for. Is it just skills? Is it something else?
Coaches are interested in players, student athletes that are going to contribute to their culture and contribute to their program. They want students, and I'm going to refer to the student athletes as kids, if you will, out of habit. Nothing derogatory, obviously.
You don't mean goats, because goats have kids.
Right. No, I'm talking about student athletes. But the coaches want to know that this child, this student, is going to be a positive contributor to the environment that they've created, to the culture that they've created. I can't overemphasize this. It's similar to the application and admissions process for non-student athletes. It's very competitive. There's a lot of kids, a lot of student athletes that are just as fast and run just as well and jump just as high and can hit the baseball or hit the tennis ball or kick the soccer ball or, score goals on the lacrosse field. I mean, they can do it as well as your son or daughter. And they come from all over the country and even internationally, depending upon the programs and the schools that you are interested in. And the coach is going to look to, identify the ones that he or she want to spend time in conversation with and communication with. So right up front, they're going to watch you. They're going to get feedback on you. They're going to be at a showcase. They're going to be at a tournament. They're going to be at a camp. And if they see your student athlete arguing with a coach or arguing with a referee or an umpire or with a poor attitude or really exhibiting negative behavior after a mistake or an error, or they called out or they called a penalty and they disagree with it, it's a very negative thing. And believe me, 90% of the coaches are going to be dismissive right up front, and they won't even consider your son or daughter, regardless of how talented they are on the field. And having said that, I will also throw in that your behavior, you meaning we as parents, is also important. I mean, think about, would you as a coach have any interest in knowing that you're going to deal with for at least 4, maybe 5 years, a student athlete who's got a parent who's, I mean, we've all seen the quote unquote little league parents, AAU parents that are just, with completely unacceptable behavior. You are not helping your child if you are behaving at a tournament or at a showcase or in an event in that kind of negative fashion, exhibiting that kind of negative sportsmanship, arguing or cursing. Forget about it. Your kids are not going to have an opportunity. Now, let's assume that culture is a positive, that sportsmanship is a positive, that they have a great attitude, they demonstrate leadership. They're really the kind of kid that a coach can envision contributing to the program. Then, of course, there's a couple of major considerations. One is, does your child have the talent to compete at that coach's program level at the respective position that they play, number one. And number two, is that position being recruited for your child's class? For the class of 2020, is the coach recruiting midfielders? Does he need a goalie? Does he need a pitcher? Does he need a point guard? Does he need sprinters? It depends. Regardless, what does he need? You have to look at the rosters of the programs in which you're interested, and if sports is a real priority, and if your child wants to play in college, it is a priority, then that has to be a significant factor. Because if a coach has just recruited 2 kids in the class before to play the same position, it may be a moot point. They have X amount of scholarships available. Generally, they're sharing scholarships.
All right. So I want to cut you off before we get to that. So just to circle back, because you just laid out probably like 20 things. So character is important, both in terms of the athlete and the parent, right? So that's good. What about though skill versus talent? Like, what if someone has athletic ability versus skill? Will one trump the other? Is athletic ability something that's not as coachable and skill is, or what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are that is really a significant variable. I don't think there is a single answer for that. Depends upon the coach, depends upon the program, depends upon how wealthy, quote unquote, they are at that position. Depends upon what kind of latitude the coach has. Depends upon whether or not the coach has any qualitative insights into the character and the drive of that player. It could be that they have relationships with an AAU coach or a high school coach, and they have some additional insight. The child who picked up lacrosse as a junior in high school for the first time and exhibits significant, if not tremendous, athletic talent, but his skills and his technique or her technique are lagging because they've only been playing for a year and a half or two. Somebody with the same level of skill who's been playing since they're 8 years old is going to be viewed differently. So it is very variable, and that's a hard question to answer. It is variable, but if the coach sees significant potential and thinks that you really can get to a certain point, they're interested in winning. They need to win to be successful in their programs, but they also believe they have you for 4 or 5 years, and if they have confidence in their staff and their capabilities, they may think you're well worth investing to further develop your talent.
All right.
Very individual.
No, listen, I think you answered that well. That was, it's a tough question. I agree. Can we talk a little bit? You started mentioning money. So before we get there, I just wanted to talk about, because I was actually talking to a client of mine who's a student athlete today, and I didn't really know the answer, and hopefully he's listening tonight. In terms of the rules about when coaches can contact athletes, not to be confused with when athletes and families can reach out to coaches. Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
It varies a little bit within each sport, but generally the coaches are, like in lacrosse, they can't call you until September 1, after September 1 of your junior year.
But does that
I'm
preclude you
sorry.
from reaching out to those coaches?
No, you can reach out to the coaches anytime you want. And I encourage that we would identify and target schools that are realistic opportunities and targets and reach schools and real good fits potentially. And you have to take the initiative in this recruiting process. You can't sit back and think, well, I made all county last year. I'm going to sit back and wait for the coaches to come after me. That's not how it works. At whatever, I mean, there are, a minute percentage of kids that are so talented they can sit back and the coaches are coming after them. Other than that, you have to take the initiative. And even if coaches are coming after you, why do you want to be subordinate to what, the coaches that happen to have seen you at a showcase? Limit yourself to that. Identify what are you interested in, what are your priorities from a school perspective and location and all the other criteria, and reach out. You have to communicate. You have to do outreach. You have to let a coach know that you're interested in their program. And then, of course, we would help you with the communications outreach. What do you want to say? And you can reach out whenever. Now, they are limited about when they can call you back and, when they can email you back even. And that varies a little bit based on sport. But, generally there are some key dates. September 1st, senior year, and July 1st is another key date. I mean, it varies. It varies, and obviously we can go through that.
All right. Hang on one second here. So I see a lot of questions coming in, but I'm not going to be able to answer them easily unless you flag them. So in the chat box, there's a right vertical 3-dot icon. If you click on that, you can change that to your chat to a question, and I'll be able to flag that because it's kind of hard for me to participate in the interview and figure out the questions too. All right, so what should a student athlete expect in return after let's say they are reaching out to coaches and they're not in the window yet? Like what should they anticipate hearing back, if anything?
Well, if they don't hear anything back, that may well be an indication of a lack of interest. It is possible that it just hasn't been reviewed. You have to, and you don't want things being sent by me or your parents or Andy or anybody else, any third party, even your coach. The college coach wants to hear from you. They want to know that you have the poise and the wherewithal to communicate. So even though we may coach behind the scenes, the communication comes from you. And and you'll get a response back from the coach generally. And, if it's a form response inviting you to a camp, then, they're looking to make money, and that's not a real indication of personal interest. If it's a personal note back and you've sent them in your outreach some sort of tape of your athletic capabilities, then, you're starting a conversation. You could communicate back that I would like to call you on such and such a date, and after July 1 of this year for the rising seniors, in just a couple of weeks, the coaches can call you back. Before that, maybe not, but they can send mail to you and they can respond. They can always pick up the phone, so you could also in your outreach let them know when you would like to call, and that may, then the coach will have the opportunity to be available or have one of the coaches available for when you say that you would like to give them a call.
Let me ask you a hypothetical that happens a lot. Let's say that you're not in the window, but you're going to visit a college on your own. Is there anything precluding you from talking to the coach?
No, if you're there on site, absolutely. Let the coach know you're visiting the school on, July 14th, and you'd love to stop by and introduce yourself and see the facility if possible, but and speak to them. Absolutely. Never go to the campus without connecting, if you can. And the coaches are very attentive to the NCAA regulations, and you can rely generally on them not doing anything that they aren't allowed to do, because you need to be aware of what's reasonable, what's viable, and what's allowed so that your expectations are appropriate. But the coaches are very sensitive to to the rules and the regulations, because the penalties are very significant and severe.
And public these days because of all the scandals. So I think they're on more heightened red alert.
Absolutely, but even so, I mean, they are very attuned to what they can and can't do, because their competition is monitoring them, and they don't want to get in trouble. Their athletic directors don't want that on that reputation as a university, and they don't want to lose scholarships, which is what the traditional penalty is. And they certainly don't want to be have suspensions from conference competition or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a small community too. They're all peers of each other. They all know each other. They're like one or two people away from each other, having worked together or gone to school together or something. So that's the way.
Not only that, I mean, there's the student athlete who's interested in Amherst is also interested potentially in Williams or Middlebury or Wesleyan, or if you're interested in Bucknell, you might be interested in Lehigh, or any number of other competitive or comparable schools in the conference, and also in other conferences.
All right, so I want to talk about money in a little bit, but you mentioned the camps first, or one of us did. So that's something I just want to bring up now to segue there, because I was talking to the kid I mentioned earlier, and he told me that his dad had signed him up for a particular camp at a school that there's no way that he'll ever attend, and there are not going to be other coaches going to be viewing the athletes at this school. It's not one of these camps, where they bring in people from other colleges. So he's like, yeah, so I'm going to be doing that. I'm like, why are you doing that? He goes, well, my dad just kind of signed me up for it. I said, I don't think, because just as background, the guy has a very high academic standing, and this school, I'm not putting the school down, I'm not going to name it, is very easy to get into, and it's not a school that he would normally look at. So my feeling was, I don't think that's going to be a good use of your time. But it's very easy, though, to run all over the country and go to all these camps and showcases and all that. So can you talk about how to choose those opportunities and what to stay away from?
Excuse me. Yes, it's very important to be strategic about how you're going to spend your time and invest your time in this process. And it's important to be strategic about which camps and what showcases you participate in. The camps are a money-making proposition for the schools, period. Yes, it's also an opportunity for coaches to get to see athletes, but it's not a place to spend any time if you're not particularly interested in that school, and or it's not a camp, as Andy alluded to, that's going to have other coaches. Strategically identify the camps where schools that you are interested in, which you are interested, are going to have coaches participating in the showcase or in the camp. And we can do that. You can do that. That's where you want to spend your time and energy. And oftentimes it may be that they are coaches from a similar type of schools, but maybe not within the conference. Maybe that coach does not want to host a camp that also has their immediate conference rivals, but some other comparable in terms of talent level kinds of kids can be there. You're not going to see coaches from Vanderbilt, North Carolina, and Georgia going to a camp that is, for elite academic D3 schools. It doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of anybody's time. But these are costly, and they make money, but however, they can also be very meaningful. I mean, I have seen numerous times going to a camp for a school that you're interested in, where you do have the ability to compete at that level, indicates to that coach you have a serious interest, and gives the coach an opportunity, a convenient opportunity to see you firsthand and see you in a series of drills and see and get more exposure to you than if they watched an entire match or game, because you may or may not have significant opportunities in a particular game. You go to a camp, you're going to have a lot of repetitions, and they're going to be able to really come to conclusions. So especially if you've gotten some level of interest from the coach, some level of attention from the coach, and you've got a real interest and are viable at that level of competition, the camp could be a great idea, but oftentimes it's really not in your interest. You've got to be strategic about it.
So another reason that I always find is valid to go to these things, that strategically though, as you said, is that a lot of times you'll meet other athletes, from who are on that team, because a lot of them are doing the coaching. You'll meet the assistant coaches who sometimes do a lot more of the coaching than the head coach does. So it's a good opportunity to see if you think you'd be a good fit at that school. It's not just the other way around.
True. That is true. Anytime you go to any of these events, their players are going to be participating. So you will get some good insight there. And then obviously college visits are important as well. And you will get to see the kids. You can rest assured that the kids are going to be pretty positive when they're working on behalf of the coach and in the program. And they normally would be anyway. But you're right. I think that's a good point. It's very valuable to see them. It's just got to be a school where, one, you're viable, two, ideally they're interested and they are aware of you already. So,
good.
And you want to make sure they're aware before you go. If you have an interest in a school and you haven't really had the opportunity to establish a relationship with a coach, you've got to establish that communication and make sure they know you're coming and this is your position, and validate that they have opportunities and they're recruiting your position for your year. And that, there's some sense that you are potentially competitive and a candidate for their team.
Great. Okay. So I want to switch gears now to the money. I do see some more questions coming in. I see a couple people using the red Q&A toggle thing, and a lot of people who are not. So I'm going to definitely get everyone who raised their hands, or I'm going to try to, with the flagging the question. If you have a question, you post it in chat, use the 3-dot thing. That's going to help me. Please help me help you. Okay. So let's talk about money. Other than bribing coaches to be on the sailing team and photoshopping, when is it appropriate to start the discussion? Actually, before I even get to the appropriate thing, talk about the reality of how much money there is in athletic scholarships, because I always hear these, rumors about, such and such got a full ride scholarship to play, to swim at Brown, blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, that's impossible because IBs don't have scholarships. It's all need-based aid. And it's very unlikely to get a full ride unless you're a Division I football or basketball guy, which are the two fully funded programs, types of scholarship programs. So, what's the truth about money in the NCAA and athletic scholarships?
The truth is, as you said, it's very hard to get a scholarship. It's even harder to get a full scholarship. Football and basketball for men's sports, basketball, gymnastics, tennis, volleyball for women's sports. Those are the only full scholarship sports where it's a head count scholarship. Everybody gets a full ride, so to speak, or a scholarship is available. The other sports are called equivalent scholarship sports at the D1, D2 level. And that means they've got a fixed allocation of scholarships available for the program, period. And, in baseball, a Division I program has 11.7 scholarships available. And the coach has a lot of latitude as to how he spreads that out. But if they have 35 men on the roster, you can do the math. And, approximately on average, that's a third of a scholarship per kid. But of course, on average doesn't really apply because the top pitchers are going to get the most. And then the catchers and, depending upon what's most required, most desirable. So there's a lot of variability there. And, that, and then for Division III, they're not giving athletic scholarships. Their scholarships are based on need or merit. And the thing that's really interesting is it can be incredibly valuable because a athletic coach can have a significant influence and help a applicant, a student athlete, perhaps compensate for a lesser athletic scholarship at the D1 or D2 level by persuading admissions to allocate financial aid dollars or merit dollars to them. So it could be that you end up with significantly more money than just your athletic scholarship. At the D3 level, that could be really meaningful, really important. because the coaches have, and at the Ivy League as well, the coaches have the ability in some conferences and for some schools to influence admissions and get some preference, if you will, for competitive student athletes who are also desired by the coach to compete on the teams. I mean, at the Division I level, financial aid for a recruited student athlete who is getting some subset of an athletic scholarship, then financial aid, this is interesting, financial aid will be counted as athletic scholarship dollars, unless that student has academic achievements above a certain level, GPA above X, SAT or ACT score above Y, in which case it won't count against the coach's athletic allocation, if you will. So, there are variables, but one point I will make is that it always pays to do as well as you can academically. It can be extremely helpful. It can help you get into schools you never would have had a chance to get into otherwise. It can help you get money at schools where you might have been able to get into, but you might not have been able to afford. And it can help you. It can help make an expensive out-of-state university viable for you, because it'll allow you to tap into academic dollars without going against the coach's athletic scholarship allocation, if you will. I know this may sound confusing, but there's a lot to consider.
It's a limited budget. I mean, it's not confusing. It's a limited budget. They have scarce resources, and just to plus what you were saying about the grades. Another reason is that coaches would rather recruit good students who are going to stay academically eligible and succeed 4 years or longer. They don't want a kid who's going to flunk out in 6 months. It's a waste of time and resources.
That's a great point. It's like hiring somebody. You want to have all that investment in time, energy, and money. Bring somebody on board and integrate them into your program, train them, and then have them fail. You don't want that. And you don't want them to transfer. Ideally, you want it all to work out. And ideally, obviously, the student athlete wants it to work out as well. But that's a great point.
But, listen, that's one of the first questions coaches want to know is what are your grades and what are your scores, when you're filling out these questionnaires. So
Absolutely.
You want to look stronger rather than weaker. And like you just said, if you're in the running for athletic money or merit-based money or something else, it's great to be eligible for merit-based money, because then the coach doesn't have to use as much of his athletic budget. And let's say you stop playing the sport. It's midway through. That's what happened to me at Wesleyan. I stopped after my second year, but I was still getting need-based aid at that point. But you want to pick a school that you're going to be comfortable at, even if you don't play. And if you have an athletic scholarship versus a merit scholarship, maybe you're going to lose a few bucks. But if you have a merit scholarship because your grades are good, especially at a D3 school, then there shouldn't be much of a disruption.
Right. Absolutely.
So when's the right time to talk about money? Because that hangs up a lot of people, a lot of parents. That, they go down this dance, and it's like the sleeping elephant in the room. So I'll just give you a scenario. So let's say a coach has actually had a conversation with a student athlete and their family. So it's not just blast emails. They've actually started to engage in a relationship, and they've met, and the coach has said something like, "Yes, could you see yourself playing here? Let's talk about it." Take it from there. When do you bring up the potential for college funds?
Well, you don't want to be premature about it. That would turn a coach off. If it's after there's been an established communication back and forth, you don't want to bring it up until there's a clearly established interest on the part of the coach. From my point of view, you are not serving yourself well if you start asking about how big a scholarship can I get before it's clearly established that there's a good fit here, and the coach is giving you very clear indication that he or she is very interested in you joining their program. I mean, you can ask questions like, how many roster spots do you have available, coach? Are you recruiting my position for 2020? How do you think I would fit into the program? How can I help you better evaluate? That kind of conversation. But once you get to the point where there's really expression of interest, at that point it's appropriate. Coach, I love what we've talked about. I think the program is great. The school is great. It's got the subject areas that I'm interested in studying. I've really enjoyed my time with the rest of your team. I think it could be a great fit. I'm certainly really interested, and but finances are important, an important consideration for my family. When is the right time for us to talk about that? I mean, that's how I would ask it. Let them tell you whether or not it's the right time, and the coach will appreciate that. Again, you have to feel this as a sense. I mean, imagine, and we're talking about your 17, 18-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old son or daughter, so they don't have a world of experience, obviously. But you as a parent, I mean, think about when you're interviewing for a job. I mean, when do you start talking about salary? It's usually not the very first thing you're talking about, unless you've been highly recruited and even then you want to establish some rapport and some basis of common and mutual interest. So that's how I would answer that. You have to read it. There's usually clear indication of interest, and there ought to be from the coach and the coaching staff.
Now, for me, the flip side is frequently parents wait until it's too late, and they're afraid to bring it up at all. So what'll happen? I see a lot of times they'll go ahead, they'll say yes, we're coming, and then they'll submit financial aid forms, and then they'll find out they don't qualify for anything, and they're like, now what? So don't do that.
What level you're at? Yeah, it depends what level you're at, and here we are. We're talking about. If we're talking specifically about juniors, rising seniors, I mean, this summer is the right time to start that conversation. But you still don't want to, even though there's a condensed timetable now, but certain things have to happen. I would not lead the conversation with the coach. How big a scholarship can I get?
Right.
That's not the opening line of the relationship.
So, so talk about when the coach is. So let's say you have that conversation, and the coach says, "Yes, well, here's what we can do. We can talk to the financial aid office, or tell me, give me your grades. I can run them by the admissions office." In your experience, how important is what they call the pre-read, both in terms of the pre-read from financial aid and the equivalent to the admissions office when they take your. What I mean by that is when they take your academic file on the Division III level, and they bring it either through the liaison to the admissions department or directly to the admissions department. Like, how important is that, and what are your tips and advice on that?
From my point of view, that's hugely meaningful, very meaningful, because that's a clear indication of very significant and serious interest on the coach's part. And you, as the student athlete and or as the parent of the student athlete, want to get some sense of, there are no guarantees in this world, but you want to get some good, clear sense of what is reasonable and realistic as far as your expectations go. What's viable, what's not, what can your expectations be? How aggressive do you need to be in continuing some of your other conversations? So that is meaningful. If the coach says, I will present you in essence to the financial aid office, and I will discuss with the admissions office that I really would like to have you in the program, and we'll see. Let me find out if there's anything that can be done. That's important, very meaningful to get that pre-read. I mean, years ago there were likely letters sent out from the Ivy League schools and others as well, and they still have the equivalent of that.
Yeah, for non-athletes too.
Yeah, right. Well, back then, I don't think non-athletes got it.
Right.
Way back. I'm talking about way back. Back.
No, I know.
I played, but yeah, now everybody can get that kind of some sense. And there'll be other coaches. I mean, always appreciate the coach that is straightforward. I think it's important, obviously, but appreciate that. And sometimes the coach will say there is really nothing I can do. And they may or may not go into more detail. It may be a coach. It may be that coach has the opportunity to influence 2 kids a year with the admissions office, and you're not one of the top 2.
Right. Or it could be that some coaches at some schools have more influence than others. I had a client a couple of years ago who was recruited for a crew, who was the coach at MIT, and the coach said, "Listen, I love you, but you need to get an 800 on your math subject test. Otherwise, I can't recruit you." And guess what? The kid pulled it off in fall of his senior year, so that was pretty amazing. But they only have so much leeway.
Cut and paste job.
So let me ask you this though. So does it ever happen where a coach goes ahead and gets your gets your file blessed in a pre-read to the admissions office and comes back and says, yeah, everything looks good. Does it ever happen where it doesn't turn out to be the truth in your experience?
Um, I think it does happen. I have not personally had it happen with any of my folks that I've worked with, but I have heard on rare occasion, uh, you know, that somebody has said that they were misrepresented to, or that they were clearly led. Sometimes, I mean, has it ever happened? I'm sure it has happened. It's hard to know exactly unless you've been a principal or just once removed from the conversation to know exactly what was said and what wasn't said.
Mm.
I mean, coaches in general want to maintain their credibility. I mean, it is important for them not to have a reputation of misrepresentation. And I've seen a lot of coaches that go out of their way to be extremely honest and forthright. And we'll let the kids know, listen, you are absolutely, I am very interested in you, but you are the number 2 middle blocker of my volleyball recruits for this year. And I cannot offer you a scholarship or a position on the team until I have resolution from one other person, and I'm expecting that within the next week or two. I mean, I've seen it as clear cut as that, and sometimes people think they're better served to be a little less forthright. I have not personally had the experience where somebody has been told explicitly you're in, or as explicitly as could be stated, and then the scholarship or the offer was reneged upon. But it has happened.
Listen, to be fair, there's another side of the coin. A lot of times, parents and kids will play games with coaches,
Absolutely.
and yank a lot of their chains and tell 2 different or 3 different coaches, you're my first choice school, and just trying to play them off against each other. Which I'm sure
I always tell. That's a great point. I always tell parents and students, you have got to be honest. You have got to be credible, and you have got to be honest. Coaches talk. Especially if there's something negative an experience they've had that's negative. I mean, you've got to be straightforward and honest. You've got to operate. You really want to operate with integrity, and don't misrepresent. I mean, you can tell a coach that you're hugely interested in their program without telling them that if you give me this offer, I'm 100% guaranteed to be coming here. Those are 2 different things. And I always recommend that you be honest and straightforward and act with integrity. And hopefully that is going to be returned.
It's a small community where it gets around if you're not that way.
Absolutely.
It's in your self-interest to be that way. Okay, so my last question to you before we get to the questions, and again, if you have a question that you want me to make sure I flag for Jeff, create that little red Q&A doohickey thing that's on the right side of your chat box. Go find it, lob it in right now. Just click, change it from a question to from a chat to a question. And then I also want to put up the offer that I'll explain right after you answer this last question, which is just if you had to pick one mistake that families make in this process, what would you say?
I would say that the biggest mistake people make is that they sit back and wait for the recruiting to come to them.
Me too.
I think that's the biggest mistake. You have got to take the initiative. You've got to reach out. You've got to deploy your coach and your AAU or high school coach or both in coordinated fashion. You got to be strategic. You got to have a strategic plan of outreach and communications. You've got to create your player info, your athletic and academic profile, your resume, so to speak. You've got to target schools realistically. You have got to go out there and do this. Even if you are a great player, you have got to take the initiative and do it and get some sort of indication from that coach as soon as possible as to whether or not you're viable and or they have an interest. And you can't take it personally if they don't have an interest. I mean, it's personal in the sense that they're commenting on you, but it could be with regard to their existing roster. It could be with regard to the number of scholarships they have. It could be that they don't think you're talented enough for their program. It could be a lot of reasons, but none of them need to be taken personally. However, you're much better served if you get clarity as soon as possible in the process so that you can focus where it makes sense.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, because I say this a lot, is it's almost like you're doing the recruiting. You're not being recruited. You have to recruit the coaches. You can't just sit back and wait like a catcher's mitt and wait for the offers. And by the way, there's so many examples of athletes, of great athletes who went unrecruited or lightly recruited, like John Stockton and Jerry Rice, and like all these people. I sent you an article a couple weeks ago. I can't remember who that was about, but these stories happen all the time. People get overlooked, even in today's digital world where everyone's on YouTube. Maybe it's harder to recruit people electronically because there's so much noise out there. I don't know if it's easier.
Well, the truth is, coaches can see, because of the technology, coaches can literally, virtually, I should say, virtually see so many more athletes than they could see in the past. 20 years ago, it was really, they were limited to maybe even 15, to who they could see in person. Now, with technology, you can virtually see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of student athletes. So when they've seen what they're interested in, there could be some real significant athletes that are passed up or haven't been seen because they haven't reached out and they haven't gotten themselves into the funnel, if you will.
Sure.
No question about that.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
I have had, just in my children's high school alone, we had a volleyball player end up with a D1 ride in August, and a basketball player end up with a D1 ride in August. It happens very late, or September actually. It was like 3 days before school started for the basketball player.
Wow.
I mean, it happens. Somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
A student athlete got hurt, or they decide to go to another school. Everybody should act with integrity, but until you sign a letter of intent, it's not binding. Verbal scholarship offers are not binding.
Interesting. All right, good. So I want to talk a little bit about our program, and then I'll get to these questions. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to do my best. Please flag them. That'll help me. I know I sound like a broken record, but not everyone's doing that. So hopefully you guys have found this very helpful. I personally consider myself an expert in this, and I just learned a lot just listening to Jeff, who is a real inside expert. So hopefully you agree with me and you understand that's why he heads up our student athlete advisory program. If you are interested in chatting with Jeff specifically about your child's athletic potential in college, if you want to get a sense for the types of components of the service that Jeff heads for us, which involves helping figure out athletically, Division I, Division II, Division III, or other where you should be targeting, developing a college list, a recruiting strategy, how to coordinate your strategically your outreach to coaches, advice on showcases and camps and all these other opportunities that come down the pike. It's so easy to run around the country with a chicken with your head cut off, and that's a very valuable bit of advice and coaching that Jeff can give to you. And then, of course, help with the whole process, ultimately the applications and the essays. Jeff's a real expert there. Also, we have a sort of a proprietary software that is really helpful for all kids, particularly athletic recruits, in evaluating your chances and helping create the college list. And it also includes help navigating and actually preparing the financial aid forms and the pre-read, and all the other stuff that colleges want you to do, particularly for student athletes, as well as help negotiating. That's something that I and my wife Pearl, who files 400 to 500 of these financial aid forms every year, that's part of the program also. So if you're interested, Jeff's really busy right now with our regular students, but we can certainly accommodate no more than 7 people submitting a little application here. You just click on that blue button. There's nothing to buy. There's no obligation. And ultimately, if you end up working with us after you and Jeff thinks that you'd be a good fit, and your child would be a good fit, then you'll receive, for attending this webinar, a $1,000 scholarship discount just for showing up and listening to this. So hopefully you found this helpful. Jeff, do you have any comments before I start sorting through the Q&A?
No, my only comment would be that everything that's relevant for a non-student athlete is also relevant for the application of a student athlete.
Yeah.
98% of the time. So literally 98% of the time. You're not getting that B1, 2% scholarship or less, then it's relevant. And we can be very helpful both with the student athlete element and the student aspect, if you will.
Interesting. Okay, good. All right. Question number one from Ari Midrisky. That's the congratulations for being on this webinar. That was the young man I was talking about before in terms of the camps and stuff. Are the rules about contact with college coaches different between divisions 1, 2, and 3? So he's a lacrosse guy. So do you know?
There is some variation. Lacrosse has got some unique elements to their rules in terms of no college coach callbacks until after July 1 prior to senior year, I believe. So, we'll go back and we'll get very specific. There is mostly commonality across sports. Lacrosse, I think, has got some unique consideration, actually.
Great. Okay. And it could change, too. I mean, occasionally these rules change.
It does change.
Irene, how do you determine the coach's program? I'm not sure what she means. Irene, can you clarify that? And let Jeff, you think you know what that means.
I'm not sure if she means the culture of a program or the coach's priorities within a program.
Yeah. All right.
I'm not sure. I mean, you have to ask questions, talk to people who have been in the program. There's nothing more valuable than getting feedback from players who have been in the program or on the team, so to speak.
Yeah, and sometimes other parents too.
Yeah.
Okay. And graduates, by the way. Yeah. All right, Gina, how important are SAT or ACT scores when pursuing Division I or Division III team?
ACT and SAT scores are not nearly as important if you are a candidate for a Division I scholarship, as long as you are exceeding we didn't really talk about it, but the requirement that you have to fulfill the registration for the NCAA clearinghouse and meet the minimum academic requirements to be eligible to be playing a sport in college. And those bars are fairly low. So, and depending upon how talented you are, the threshold gets even lower. Not lower than the NCAA clearinghouse requirements, but lower than what they would be for a non-highly desired recruit. So, sure. With regard to the Division III athlete, it could be hugely important because it's going to help them promote you for academic and merit money, or if you have financial aid qualifications for that kind of money. And if they want you as an athlete and you've got that, it helps them because they don't have to go against their, perhaps the 2 or 5 kids they're allowed to recommend athletically to the admissions office, if they can kind of allocate you in a different bucket, so to speak. And in the Ivy League, they've had for many years, a calculation that they make. So I was close with a family whose son went to play baseball at the University of Pennsylvania, and the coach was hugely interested in this boy. Now, he was a good, solid high school student, but he was not a UPenn caliber student. But coach really wanted him. He was a great baseball player, and he certainly had the ability, the academic ability. And to counterbalance him, he also recruited a student athlete that had perfect scores on the SAT. So the combination did not take him below, what his cumulative team average aggregate score needed to be.
Right. So I was going to bring that up. So I'm glad you did. The academic index is what you're referring to, which was developed in the 60s to help schools, to prevent schools, Ivy League schools, from bringing in ringers, kids who had, pretty poor grades and scores. I think in general, the better you score on the SAT or the ACT, no matter what the level is, the easier you're going to make the coach's life. And that's what they're looking for. So they would rather recruit kids who with high-ish achievements, but they will certainly be able to overcome or mitigate, some low-ish scores. So if you're below the average, when you look at Naviance or something, you might think, I don't have a shot of getting in here, but you really do if you're a recruited athlete, and that's one of the reasons we use a different software, which does take that into account. So I'm sort of visualizing that as I speak here. Okay.
But the major point there is the higher your scores, the less likely you are to go against their athletic, whether it's scholarship dollars or just position allocations with the admissions office. the less likely you are to negate or go against their balance there.
Great.
So that's meaningful, very meaningful.
Good. Okay. Rick Taylor has a question. What about lesser known or played sports? My son rows crew, which I would not consider lesser known, by the way. And neither would Felicity or Lori Laughlin or what. Okay. My son rows crew, and from what I've heard, it's different from the conventional recruiting process. Well, I mean, you mentioned one thing, which I don't know if you mentioned crew specifically, but crew is one of these sports where either you have the erg time on the ergometer or you don't. So it's easier to evaluate whether someone can make the cut or not, so to speak. But are there any other differences that you perceive about crew versus other sports? I think there's more similarities than differences.
No, I think there's more similarities. I mean, the coaches, like they do in every sport, have their own unique priorities from an athletic point of view and how they view potential. And because, kids 16, 17, I mean, a lot of kids mature 19, 20, 21. And size and leverage is so important in crew, in rowing. So how a coach values that or evaluates that is going to vary. But there's similarities. I mean, it's not obviously it's not that it's lesser known. There's not as many schools with rowing programs, with crew programs.
That's true.
It's smaller. It's smaller in that sense, but
okay.
For the schools that have it, it's significant.
Yep. And it's club team for men, but an NCAA sport for women, so there's a little bit of difference there too. All right, so we're coming up on the hour here, so I got time for another couple questions, and then we're going to sign off to respect everyone's time. Wendy, when and how should junior level hockey players? Oh, hi Wendy. I know which Wendy this is. Junior level hockey players contact college coaches. And does it help that the player has been accepted to the school already but declined to play junior hockey? That's a very specific question.
Does it help? When you say decline to play junior hockey, were you talking about formal junior hockey league, or what are you referring to?
So I believe in her situation, and I don't want to be speaking out of school, is that it's like two different scenarios. One is the kid is playing junior hockey, and when should they contact college coaches, like how early in their they left high school instead of going right to college, they're playing junior hockey to kind of get bigger.
In junior hockey, as in Canada, junior hockey.
Usually, yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I didn't know if they were formally talking about that or some sort of AAU like.
Yeah, or Michigan, but it's post
Minnesota, whatever it might be. I got you. No, listen. I mean, I think, and if they're in that program, I mean, outreach in 9th, 10th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th grade for sure, obviously.
Yeah.
And not sure, and they're going to be aware of the kids that are playing junior hockey.
And then once they're in the juniors, I don't think it's ever too early to reach out.
No, if you're in the juniors, you've established a clear-cut commitment.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Demonstrating a clear-cut commitment.
Yeah.
So some level of talent.
Listen, they're going to want to see how you play, against the other juniors, and how you're progressing. So when you're ready, for them to look at you, that's when you reach out, I think. All right. So Irene, I think she clarified to set your interest. How do you learn the coach's program to send an email of interest? How do you learn about the coach's program?
Well, there's a large number of sources. Obviously, the school website, the school athletic website, and Google is, that's why God invented Google. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to get a lot of insight. And then, of course, we can talk about what, we can look at the roster. We can strategically assess what does that actually translate to. You could take a look at the accomplishment. You can see what the coach's background is before they joined this school. There's a lot of coach turnover. I want to emphasize that we've been focused appropriately, so very specifically on the athlete part of the student athlete. But, student athletes have to also be making good decisions for themselves based upon academic priorities and the school itself. Sports can end quickly for any number of reasons, and are you in the right place for yourself? You want to put yourself in a position where if circumstances change significantly, would you automatically be having to go to another school? I don't think you want to be in that position.
Great. All right, I'm going to do one more question here because they keep kind of filtering in. However, if you are interested in talking to Jeff one-on-one specifically about your student-athlete plans or dreams or aspirations, just click on that blue apply button, and that'll send a form immediately over to Jeff, and he'll evaluate it. And if he thinks that there's a reason to have a conversation because maybe he can help you, he will contact you in the next few days. Okay. So the final question from Doug, I like this question a lot. Would the Lehigh coach think less of the player if he was also pursuing Lafayette or some rival? Does the player need to disclose if they ask where else are you looking? Presuming these coaches know each other, might they discuss the player? By the way, tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's only a good thing if you tell a coach where else you're looking.
Yeah, it's not. Yes, it's not. It's not a bad thing to tell. It's a good thing for a coach to know that there's other coaches interested in you, like any other competitive market, right? There's other coaches interested in you. I would not share details of anything. I would not ever talk about the guy. The coach at Lafayette is offering me X, Y, and Z, and the coach at Bucknell said I could do this, and I would never get specific, and I would never represent what somebody else has told you. But you could say, if a coach says, where else are you looking? You can say, Coach, I'm very interested in several other Patriot League schools. And if you want to name them, you can do so. It depends. I don't think most coaches are going to push. You could say there are a couple specific ones. And there's nothing wrong with saying Lafayette and Bucknell have expressed significant interest. But I would not go into any detail about the specifics of any offers or anything like that.
Mostly because you don't want to offend them. That's sort of bad form.
Well, it's bad form, and understand that whatever you say about another school or another that represent that another coach has communicated, they're going to immediately be thinking, this is what you're saying about what I'm talking to you about.
Right.
I mean, and nobody, people generally want to know that they're speaking frankly and honestly, but they're also speaking, personally and in confidence to some degree. It's the same thing as in regular business. This is business. From a coach's point of view, it's business. This is their business.
So one small part of that question was, what if a coach asks? Well, maybe they won't even do this, but what if a coach asks you specifically what other schools are you talking to? Then would you say specifically, yes, I'm talking to Lehigh and Bucknell?
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely say that.
Instead of being dodgy or cagey.
You can say that. I'm talking with several coaches, schools in this conference, including Lehigh and Bucknell, or Lafayette and Bucknell, and they've expressed significant interest.
Good.
But I'm really interested in Lehigh, Coach, and your program, and I'd love to see if we have an opportunity to move forward together. I'd love to play for your program. And
get on. Hear that.
You don't want to spend time talking about them, but you do want to answer straightforwardly.
Yeah, but I think what you just said was great. I telling them forthright, I want to play for your program. That's important. Say it with sincerity and good faith, of course. Yeah. All right, this was awesome. We went a little over time, but I guess we sort of needed to get back because of the glitch getting started here. But this was great. Like I said, I consider myself well versed in this, and I definitely learned a handful of things I didn't know just from you, Jeff. If you're watching this and you agree with me that Jeff is a true expert and he knows his stuff, I don't think anyone can argue with that. If you get a chance to work with him, I can't recommend him enough. So if you just want to have a no obligation, no pressure preliminary discussion with him, click on that apply blue button, and he will, like I said, he will most likely contact you if he thinks that there's potentially something to talk about in terms of services. Jeff, any parting bits of wit and wisdom you want to share to the kids at home?
No, only other than, and to the parents in particular as well. I mean, it is obviously a really exciting time for you and your children, and I've been through it with mine, and there's nothing more interesting and more fun than watching your kid go through a process where, in one form or another, they are being recruited, and you're going to generate that interest with the appropriate outreach. And it's really exciting. It's a fun thing. It could be a real opportunity time for them, and it's an opportunity for them to really expand and extend, the range of opportunities they have. So I'd love to work with you. I expect that there would be opportunity to work with you, and let's explore it.
I just thought of this. Maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but I was in a meeting early today, and with two people, and one of them played lacrosse at West Point. And I told him we were doing this webinar, and I said, "So tell me about some of the people that you play with. You still in touch with them, and what's that like?" He said, I'm in the middle of doing. He's a financial plan. I'm doing a financial plan for such and such person who is a very prominent Washington power person that was his roommate, and then he played lacrosse with, and he said, yeah, it was a great experience. He was captain of his team. And it's very cool what sports can do. I'm sure you're still in touch with people you play with. I'm still in touch with people.
Sure.
Yeah, it can really be a game changer. And this guy's in his 50s now, and he's still doing well with his network that he formed playing a sport in college. And I know a lot of people like that. All right, so this was great. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Sorry about the technical glitches in the beginning, but it worked out great after a very slight delay. We are going to be sending out the replay in case you had to leave early. The offer to speak to Jeff, that has to be limited to 7 people because of our own workload. But I hope you got something out of this. I hope you found it helpful. Thanks for watching and tuning in with us and supporting our little community here at Lockwood College Prep. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.